Hey there, my name is Megan and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a spoiler-free review for The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. So The Haunting of Hill House is a book that I have had on my shelf for the longest time and just have never gotten around to. It's the perfect, just quintessential October read because it's about a haunted house, it's creepy, and I have read 3 of Shirley Jackson's short stories. I read The Lottery in high school, which is one of the most disturbing stories I've ever read, and even as an adult, I still reflect back on it and think it's very disturbing. And then I've also read The Witch, which is also very disturbing, and Charles, which is just ironic and funny. So I'm familiar with some of her work and I wanted to read her full-length work, so I decided to pick up The Haunting of Hill House. And I actually have seen the 2 movie adaptations, the one from the 50s and then the one from, I think, the early 2000s. So I was familiar with the story overall, but you just gotta read the source material. The Haunting of Hill House was written in 1959 by Shirley Jackson, and Shirley Jackson is known to be one of the earliest horror writers of, I believe, the 20th century, and she was known to be a really strong feminist. And Hill House, I think, is probably one of her more popular works, and even Stephen King said something along the lines that she was one of the most influential horror writers of the 20th century. I don't read horror because I'm a wimp and I can't get out of my comfort zone, but Hill House, in my opinion, compared probably to modern day horror, is definitely a much tamer story. It's something that I think anybody could probably read and not feel anxious over. There's really nothing in the book, in my personal opinion, that ever was really scary. Unsettling, yes. Suspenseful, yes, but scary, not at all. So I feel like it's definitely a book that set some foundations and some groundwork for modern day horror to be built upon. I just wish that I was more versed in modern day horror so I could really solidify my opinion on that. So the way that I structure my reviews is I talk about the plot, the characters, things I liked and things I didn't like, and then I gave it an overall score. In The Haunting of Hill House, we follow 4 main characters. We follow a doctor named Dr. Montague, who is known to be an expert in the paranormal and the occult, and he heard about Hill House and he wanted to go to Hill House and kind of study the paranormal activity there, and he figured that he would be more successful if he reached out to people that also had paranormal experiences or knew something in the field. So he sent all of these letters out to different people and only a couple responded. The ones that responded were a woman named Theodora, or Theo, who was said to have, I believe, telepathic ability. And then we have Eleanor, a girl who had a paranormal experience when she was a child. And she has kind of like a darker, disturbing past, and it's in her head where we spend most of the story. And then we have Luke, and Luke is actually the heir to Hill House. His family is the one that currently owns it, and he is one of those guys that just doesn't care about responsibility. He's known to be kind of like a cheat and a swindler. So it's definitely a very dynamic group of characters, and they're all different in their own way. Once the group gets to Hill House and gets settled in, they start learning about the history of Hill House. They start learning about the guy who built it and his 2 daughters. They start learning about why he built it the way that he did, and they start experiencing paranormal things. For example, every time they open a door, the door will close after them. They can't seem to find their way within the house. They hear noises at night, like banging on the doors. And Eleanor especially seems to be the one that is most affected by these paranormal occurrences. Next, I'm going to talk about the characters. So like I said, the main character that we follow is Eleanor, and Eleanor is in her mid-30s, and we learn a lot about her. We learn that she spent the majority of her adult life caring for her ailing mother who had recently died, and she is currently living with her sister's husband, and their baby. So she has never had a place to call her own. She's never really been self-sufficient. She's always either been caring for others or having other people take care of her. So when she got the invitation to go to Hill House, she jumped on it. She stole the car from her sister and drove to Hill House, and it was just kind of her way to start a new life, to have a new experience, to kind of get out of the weight of responsibility that she has felt her entire adult life. Then we have Dr. Montague. Dr. Montague is the one that set up this whole experiment by them going to Hill House and staying overnight at Hill House, and he is just there to gather information and study the paranormal activity. Then we have Theodora. Theodora is very self-sufficient to me because this book was written in, I believe, 1959. She's kind of like what I think women would envision a modern feminist woman being. She has her own job, her own apartment. She is very outspoken. She is very funny and flamboyant. She's got a really lively personality. And we can see that Eleanor really covets those things about Theodora. Theodora is kind of like a character foil for Eleanor. Eleanor is shy and reserved. Theodora is the exact opposite. And you see the fact that they are opposites causes them to be drawn together and become really close friends in the beginning of the book. And then lastly, we have Luke. We don't really know too much about Luke. He's always kind of grumbling about the fact that he'll have to be responsible for Hill House eventually because he wants nothing to do with it. It's old, it's decrepit. And I feel like he doesn't have a huge part to play in the book. And we do learn as the story progresses that Eleanor does develop kind of like a small crush on Luke. It's really not a big part of the plot. I honestly don't think it's even worth mentioning. I'm going to talk about the things that I liked. So the first thing that I liked was Hill House itself. So normally when you think of a haunted house story, you think of a gorgeous Victorian mansion that is just haunted with paranormal things. This is not the case. Hill House is not described as a pretty house. It's described as being a grotesque house. It is dark and dreary, and it was even built to be unsettling. So the original builder of the house purposely made everything disproportionate so that when you walked into the house, you just felt a sense of wrongness. I thought that was incredibly clever. I thought it just added to the idea that this house had a mind of its own and was a living organism of some sort. And I really thought that that was a good choice for Shirley Jackson to do. The next thing I liked was our main character, Eleanor. I love stories that have unreliable narrators. When you first start reading the story and you read from Eleanor's perspective, you think that she's just a woman in her 30s that really doesn't have much life experience, has been kind of sheltered. But as the story progresses, you kind of realize that Eleanor, in my opinion, is a bit of an unreliable narrator just because of how she's affected by the house and of some of the things that she thinks and the way that she responds to other people in the house, specifically Theo. I just felt like it was made apparent that there was something going on with her psyche as the story went on, and I really enjoyed reading about that. The next thing I liked was the fact that this book was so short. My version is only about 150 something pages, and I feel like Shirley Jackson was able to craft a really good story with really compelling characters and even follow an entire character arc in such short page lengths. And the last thing I liked was really the symbolism of the house itself. So when I read this book, I thought that the house was symbolic of Eleanor's life of oppression. So she's not really oppressed in the way that you think someone would be oppressed. It's not like she was ever sold into slavery or indentured servitude or anything like that. But she was oppressed in the way that she was forced to take care of her ailing mother who did not treat her well. She was never able to live a life on her own. She was always tied down to something. So when I first read this, I was like, okay, the house is basically a manifestation of that idea of her oppression and the fact that she was never able to live her own life and go see things and experience things, because the house is calling to Eleanor. It is trying to latch onto Eleanor and steal Eleanor. So I feel like that was just very symbolic of the fact that everything in Eleanor's life on a normal basis was trying to steal her life from her. And I actually did, after I finished the book and I kind of internalized all of that, and that's what I had thought, I was like, okay, let me just look up and see what some other people think the house might symbolize. And most people, I don't want to say people, but like most, I don't know, literary critics said that the house kind of symbolized the human psyche. So I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. I didn't think about it like that. So personally, I thought that the house symbolized Eleanor's life and just how oppressed she was. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think if you read this book, because I just found that a very interesting aspect of the story personally, was how Eleanor connected to the house and what that actually represented in her life. Now I'm going to talk about the things that I didn't like. There really wasn't too much that I didn't like. The first thing, like I said, Eleanor was an unreliable narrator, but I feel like there was a moment in the story where Eleanor's personality just kind of switched. She was acting a certain way towards Theodora, and then it was like, you know, a snap, and she was having all of these different thoughts towards Theodora and acting in different ways. So I just felt like that transition from where we're starting to see Eleanor's change just happened way too quickly. And the last thing I didn't like was the ending, so I'm not going to spoil it for you, and I actually didn't remember how it ended, even though I had seen the movie, and I'm super glad. But as we were nearing like the last 25%, I realized what was going to happen, and I get why she ended it like that, because obviously Eleanor had some things going on in her psyche. She had some things going on with her mental health. She was under this, I want to say, almost a spell by Hill House. And I get why Shirley Jackson ended it like that, but I find it a little bit problematic, because it's almost like, if you're dealing with these issues, if you're dealing with this depression, if you're dealing with feelings of hopelessness, that is not the way to address it or take care of it. All right, you guys, so that is it for my review of Hill House. All in all, I really liked it. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I loved the creepy house. I loved the characters. I loved the character dynamic together. And Shirley Jackson is definitely a very talented author, and one that should be praised. I look forward to reading more of her novels as well as her short stories. And I will see you guys soon in another video. Goodbye.